Yeah. Well, so I'd say it's I have the same feeling. It's a very honest feeling, which is Jesus would walk into some of our gatherings and be like, hey, enough's enough already. Go help some people that are needy. And I think there's two sides to that. And there's a story in Scripture that kind of elicits the tension there. Jesus taught multitudes. There was times when he brought people together for the time of teaching, being together. So there was times when Jesus did teaching ministries rather than just what we would call benevolence or love-based ministries, okay? Jesus also walked out and gave to the poor and found needy people along the way and did all he could to help them. His disciples began to learn that Jesus was very concerned with us authentically living out justice, okay, and the poor. To by the end of his ministry, they've kind of caught up now. They've made the mistake enough times where they've thought it was all about the business and Jesus is stopping for the people, that they're like, oh, it's the people, it's the people. So they've kind of caught up to that. And then all of a sudden there's a situation where Jesus is in a room and there's his disciples and a woman comes and pours perfume over Jesus' head. And the disciples are like, oh, we know the right answer. The right answer is you shouldn't have done that. You should have given the money to the poor. And Jesus is like, no, what she did was as pure as it gets. She was enraptured by me. This was an act of worship and adoration. Leave her alone. And so you end up finding that there's a tension between the two. And Jesus didn't stop people from going to the temple to worship God. He was mad when it got turned too much into a business and people were in the court of the Gentiles, meaning keeping the Gentiles far from God. And not only were they doing that, but it's kind of like a corrupt racket and money-making business. So he dealt with this, but he didn't say, stop coming to the temple. In fact, he was sitting at the temple one day, and this woman comes in and puts her last coin in the offering to support the priests who do the temple. Because the priests in the Old Testament were supposed to be living off of the tithes and the offerings. Not the poor, but the priests were supposed to be living off of some of the tithes and offerings. So what you begin to find is it's not one or the other, it's both and. So what I would say to you is if a church is only doing this and not serving the poor, then Jesus would have some real issues with kind of the Pharisaism, the legalism, the religiosity of it. If all we do is tend to run around and help the poor, but we never gather, it tends to have very little center of gravity as a community of believers encouraging one another and learning and having opportunity to worship. So somewhere in the middle, and I doubt Antioch will ever hit it perfect. I doubt I would ever say we'll hit it perfect. But somewhere in the middle, there's a both and that's needed where we really authentically give to the community and where we authentically also learn, gather, worship, and encourage one another to continue on with the messiness of life and trusting God. So holding these in tension is, I think, where we should be. If we get too much on the extreme of either of them, we're going to miss something vital to the life of the church. So.